minutes, and this is the first time we've met in person, although we've just talked over podcast, and she's been an important leader in helping me build children's health defense and helping organize the resistance. She's a unique individual. She's really an international treasure. She came up at the center of what we would call the deep state as a high official at Dillon Reed, which is one of the leading banking houses in our country, and then working as Assistant Secretary of Treasury at HUD, and has spent a lifetime exposing the corruption in the banking system, in the federal banking system, and she's paid a very, very high price for that. So I want to thank her for her leadership, and she understands what's happening, mechanisms on a very, very high level about what we're seeing here, which is this coup d'etat, global coup d'etat against liberal democracy in Europe, in North America, Australia, Canada, all over the world. I want to make one comment on the medical issue, and I'm not a doctor, but I read very, very carefully as a litigator. I read the preclinical trial studies, and one of the data points that was not mentioned here, to me, is one of the data points we've paid a lot of attention to in the United States, which is Pfizer is the only company now that has received approval by the FDA. So we've looked very carefully at their data points and their report. And Pfizer had originally was going to do a 3-year trial. It cut it to 6 months. It apparently cut it to 6 months because, as we now know, the vaccines lose effectiveness after 6 months, and it would be very difficult for them to justify an approval if they allowed the study to go more than 6 months. So they unblinded the study after 6 months, and they gave the vaccine to the placebo group, so that the study is effectively over. And then, but they did have to publish a study to justify their approval, their licensure by the FDA. And one of the key tables in that study is a table called S4. And that shows one of the, probably to me, the most important data point, which is all-cause mortality. Were there more people who died in the placebo group or in the vaccine group? Here's what that graph says, and you have to also read the footnotes to the graph because they omitted some information, and you can see why they did. There were roughly 22,000 people in the vaccine group. There were 22,000 people roughly in the placebo group. At the end of 6 months, there was 1 death from COVID in the vaccine group. And there were 2 deaths from COVID of 22,000 people in the placebo group. So Pfizer was able to tell FDA and the American public this vaccine is 100% effective against death, because 2 is 100% of 1. What most Americans, when they hear that data point, what they believe is if they take the vaccine, they have a 100% chance of not getting COVID. But that's not what it means. What it means is you have to give 22,000 vaccines to avert 1 death from COVID. And so you have to make sure that nobody dies from those 22,000 vaccines. Unfortunately, what their data show is that in the vaccine group, there were 20 deaths. Among the 22,000 people over 6 months, 20 of them died. In the placebo group, 14 died. What that indicates, if you get the vaccine, and this is what Pfizer's data is saying, you have a 48% greater chance of dying over the next 6 months. You have a half of that, you have half your chance of dying of COVID. But in the placebo group, there was one person who died of a heart attack. In the vaccine group, there were 5 people who died of a heart attack. What it indicates is that if you take the vaccine, you have a 500% greater chance of dying of a heart attack over the next 6 months, according to Pfizer's data. And what it also indicates that for every life that they save from COVID, 4 people are dying of heart attacks. And that's not a good bargain. I want to say the principal point, the point that I came to Switzerland to talk about. You have a referendum on November 28th. Because Switzerland is not part of the EU, people of this country have retained their democratic rights to vote directly on the law. So this is the only country in Europe where democracy has a chance to stand up to what we call this global coup d'etat against democracy. And what we've seen since the beginning of COVID is very strange. We did not see a medical response to the pandemic. We did not see doctors like Dr. Fauci going on TV and telling people to increase vitamin D use, to avoid chemical residues in their food, to lose weight, to have lots of social interactions, to reduce stress in their lives, to try to stay outside and get plenty of sunshine, to exercise. We never saw any of that. It was a militarized and monetized response from the beginning. It was telling people, imposing draconian controls on human behavior with no scientific rationale given. And in our country, we saw a direct assault on our Bill of Rights, beginning with freedom of speech. We have amendments to our Constitution that guarantee rights to the American people. The First Amendment, the constitutional framers, the people who wrote our Constitution, put the most important right in the First Amendment, which was the right to freedom of speech. If you don't, because John Adams, James Madison, Thomas Jefferson said, if government can restrict your speech, they can commit any atrocity. They can get rid of all of your other rights. And they began using their alliance with the social media companies and the big media behemoths. They began censoring any criticism of government policies and any criticism or questions about a novel, zero liability experimental pharmaceutical product. Once they got rid of freedom of speech, so that people like me are not allowed to talk about it, or criticize these policies or ask questions about these policies. None of these doctors are allowed to question these policies. People who are injured by vaccines cannot question the policies, cannot talk about their injuries in public. They cannot be reported by the press in our country. Once they got rid of that amendment, they went after religious freedoms. They closed all the churches in America for a year, with no public hearings, no explanation, no science given. They kept the liquor stores open as essential businesses. And I have no problem with that. But the liquor stores are not in the Constitution, the churches are. They got rid of private property rights. They closed 1 million businesses for a year without just compensation, without due process of law. There was no hearings. There was no science debated. They just shut them down. They got rid of jury trials. The 6th and 7th Amendment guarantee jury trials in our country. Here's what the 7th Amendment says. No American shall be deprived of the right of a jury of a trial before a jury of his peers in cases or controversy exceeding $25 in value. There is no pandemic exception. And by the way, the people who wrote our Constitution knew all about pandemics, because during the Revolutionary War, we had a smallpox pandemic that sidelined George Washington's army for 3 months in New England, and a malaria epidemic that sidelined the Army of Virginia. So his two armies were both sidelined by pandemics. So the framers who wrote the Constitution knew all about pandemics, and they did not put an exception to pandemics. They got rid of due process of law, which they've done in all the countries in Europe. Instead of having public hearings, where officials have to publish the proposed rule, they have to do some kind of environmental assessment that explains the rationale for the rule. They have to do a cost-benefit analysis that shows all of the science behind that justifies the rule, that shows all the people who are going to be hurt by the rule, all the people who are going to gain from the rule. All of that has to be disclosed in a transparent way. And you have public hearings where people can come and say, I have my own science, I have my own experts. Let's have this debate. Democracy flourishes on the free flow of information. Free speech is sunlight and water and fertilizer for democracy. We need to have ideas that can triumph in the marketplace of ideas as the basis of our policies. All that has been obliterated. Instead, we have unelected technocrats, medical technocrats who we know are captured and corrupted by the pharmaceutical industry and the banking interest. And they are simply telling us, put on the mask, lock down, social distance, shut down the economy, and they have demolished democracy. They have obliterated the middle class throughout the world. They have robbed us of our freedoms. And the one place, the front line in this battle, if we are going to win, is here in Switzerland. And it occurred, the big battle occurs on November 28th, when in the one instance across the globe, we had all of our liberal democracies pivot suddenly and obliterate democracy. The one place where the people of a nation can stand up and say, we are not going to be your slaves. We are going to take back control of our government. We are going to reclaim our sovereignty. We are going to rebuild democracy. The one place that can happen is Switzerland. And if Switzerland, if we win, if democracy wins this vote in Switzerland, it will spread virally across the globe. If we lose here, we lose a lot of hope. So it's very, very important for the people of Switzerland to stand up and say, it's not that we don't believe that COVID is not dangerous. We have all the different, it's not that we don't believe that vaccines may help. Some people may believe that. That's okay. You can believe in vaccines or against vaccines, but we all need to believe in democracy. And we all need to believe to respect each other and to tolerate each other and to say we are going to build communities that are dignified, that respect all of our citizens, and make sure that all those diverse voices can be heard in the political process. We are not going to turn our government over to pharmaceutical industries, to the big tech data titans from Silicon Valley, to these medical technocrats, and to the banking system. You think about this. I got expelled from Instagram because of vaccine misinformation. Instagram and Facebook cannot point to one single erroneous statement that I ever made. Everything we post is vetted It is sourced and cited to government databases or peer-reviewed publications. When they use the term vaccine misinformation, they are using it as a euphemism for any statement that departs from official government policies and pharmaceutical industry profit-taking. It has nothing to do whether it's true or false. It only has to do with what the political implications are. And who is doing this censorship? It's government officials in league with Bill Gates, with Larry Ellison, with Mark Zuckerberg, with Sergey Brin from Google, and with all of these internet titans. They have engineered not only the destruction of our democracy and our civil rights, but they have engineered the biggest shift of wealth in human history. $3.8 trillion from working people to these handful of billionaires, many of them from Silicon Valley. This pandemic has impoverished the world and created 500 new billionaires. And those are the people who are strip mining our economies and making themselves rich. And is it a coincidence that these are the same people who are censoring criticism of the government policies that are bringing them trillions of dollars? People aren't stupid. We can see what's happening. We can ask the question, cui bono? And the answer is the people who are benefiting are the people who are squeezing away our constitutional rights and engineering the destruction of democracy worldwide. Switzerland is the front line for this battle. We need all the Swiss people to come out, not just for Switzerland, but for the entire world, for everybody, every man, woman, and child who loves democracy globally, who respects their fellow man or woman. Switzerland is the front line battle for reclaiming those rights. Thank you.